All right, welcome everyone to the 14.3 GitLab retrospective discussion. So as always, our retrospective discussion goes in 4 different parts. First, we start with talking about previous retrospective improvement tasks and the status of those. Then we go through some discussion topics that we've circulated beforehand. Then we talk about and track improvements that we want to carry forward for the next release, and then we wrap up. So let's start with previous retrospective improvement tasks. I had the first one, which it kind of came in between the last retrospective and this one, but it was a suggestion to move to sub-department retros. We're also going to have this as a discussion item, but I've been tracking it. There's a proposal, including an issue and an MR referenced for moving, I use the word sub-department, it's more like sections, moving from one R&D wide retrospective to section by section so that dev, sec, enablement, fulfillment, MLOps, ops will have their own retrospective discussions, just like we're doing here. So that proposal is out there, and that is my update. The next one is with Jerome or Kyle. Are either one of them on? Jerome's there.
I can take this one. So last retrospective, we talked about trying to further align GitLab Inc. and Jihu's development processes. So since then, what we've done is we've spoken with the Jihu team, and we had a really good discussion about how we do iteration at GitLab, what our coding standards are, and ensuring that they've got all of those guidelines and that they're able to follow them. So we've linked over to just an agenda item. And we've also have some examples of MRs, specifically with the Zentao integration that the Jihu team's been working on. And we provided coaching and feedback to them there so that they can get used to the process we're contributing to GitLab.
Great.
I'll hand it over to Tanya.
Yeah, and actually I spoke to Tanya before this meeting. She wasn't able to attend. She's got some other higher priority things at the moment. So she told me that she had not made progress, but will be working to delegate this before the next retro. So thanks, Tanya, for the update. And Christopher, you had the next item.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in a similar boat as I've had other issues that are higher priority, so we haven't had a chance to look at maintainer availability this month.
Gotcha. John Hope, I saw you on. You have the next item.
Yeah, the retro action was to try and quantify how much time we were spending on deprioritized features. So there's a dashboard there which will show like reviews and MRs created. You can scope it by team or you can scope it by group, gives slightly different data in each case, and there's a global view as well. So yeah, I already got some pretty interesting insights from this. On the other hand, we don't insist that people like put category labels on MRs. So there's some manual work required to add those labels and then to wait for them to propagate. Nevertheless, it is quite interesting. There's a snippet, like a shared snippet of what's considered a deprioritized category, which anyone is like welcome to go in and edit, and the chart will update in real time. So there's a video there as well. If you're interested, you can check that. And if you prefer to watch instead of read, and let me know if it's interesting. I think it can be improved by, instead of using counts, maybe we could look at the time spent or the number of discussion items on these MRs, but it's just a start.
Great. Anyone have any, that seems like a great improvement. Anyone have any thoughts or comments on that? Thanks, John. Okay, let's move to discussion topics. So there was one discussion topic called out in the issue that Phil provided. It's like 5 a.m. Phil's time. So I paraphrase from a couple of comments of his in the issue, and I'll verbalize for him. Phil was pointing out that there were several company-wide tasks that kind of took time away from development in this milestone, particularly impacting engineering managers, things like 360 reviews, mid-year check-in. There were a number of required and optional trainings, both within the development and R&D departments and company-wide. And so that became just a lot of additional overhead in one given milestone. So one of the things that was kind of a suggested improvement was how can we make sure we spread those activities over multiple milestones and understand that like milestone boundaries, it's really hard to squeeze multiple things like that in one milestone boundary. I thought I'd start the discussion with how can we do that? One thing that came to mind was just creating some sort of beyond milestone activities handbook page or calendar that would at least inform others who are thinking, oh, we should add this training for this next month to know there's already a bunch of other stuff maybe on team members' plates. Anybody else have suggestions? Anybody else experienced this and want to verbalize how they experienced it and how it impacted them?
I know I definitely experienced it where there was a bit of a heavier workload in the last quarter or so. One of the things was 360 reviews and mid-year performance reviews. What I ended up doing was doing a lighter mid-year performance review and just focusing more on 360s. And instead for the mid-year performance, just do like a pulse check of where team members are on the growth and performance matrix. So instead of doing the, a very in-depth mid-year performance review.
Thanks, Jerome. Christopher, you had a comment or verbalize?
Yeah, I like this a lot, idea a lot. If maybe we have an idea how we could quantify it, it would help just like, like average number of hours or something like that per person. I think that would help a lot in this situation. We're getting pretty good about talking about trainings and like, oh, the training needs to be below this threshold for us to consider it, or above this. If it's above this threshold, we'll consider it more impactful. Not more impactful, I'm sorry, but we go through a higher level of scrutiny before we basically ask people to take it. So I don't know if we always have the option to just like shift it around. Like I don't know if Phil's intent was just like, hey, if we can give on certain things. We sometimes have that option, but a lot of times we don't. What I'm thinking about is in Q4, we're going to be in the same situation with end of year reviews and comp considerations and other things. So January is typically a very busy month for us. Well, December and January are both very, very busy months. December, particularly because it's compressed, and then January because there's a lot of final work there associated with that. So, but being able to quantify that would definitely help, I think.
And just to clarify, quantify is if we get a sense of the number of hours this would impact and the number of team members, that would be.
I think that's the thing I'm thinking about is like, like, does it affect everybody? And then like, some like most of our trainings now we've got down to like, okay, it's going to be 4 hours or 8 hours or, 2 days worth of time. So.
Great. Any other thoughts on that topic? All right. The second topic was one that Sam had mentioned, and Sam wasn't available, Sam from the pipeline execution team, where he was experiencing that as the pipeline execution and verified teams were trying to ship MVCs, they found it difficult when, well, especially as we all know, the verified team has been really focused on reliability and scalability, that has made it more difficult to ship MVCs. And I'm wondering if team members who have experience in other high traffic parts of the product have some tips or tricks for how to continue to iterate and ship MVCs, even in places that might be getting a lot of traffic or have scalability concerns.
I want to share a little bit about how database team, roll out the PK migration. So what they did is actually for a few very large tables, they worked offline with the delivery team to schedule some manual work over the weekend to get prepared, like create the keys manually during the weekend, the low traffic time. Then it doesn't involve a lot of system load here. Then during the work week, we switch that column. So very special case. I mean, it's not scalable, but for very specific cases, we want to reduce the load on the system.
Great, yeah. I'll just respond specifically, Chen. I think that typically we think of feature flag rollouts as a way to control rollout, something that maybe is potentially impactful in high traffic parts of the product. But I like the idea of maybe thinking about when we time that feature flag might also give us a little bit more control over the impact, because there's certainly less user traffic on weekends or other days than there are on certain weekdays.
Indeed, work with the delivery team on timing, so we know that it's happening now or as a this designated time, so the team can handle any anomalies.
Christopher, do you want to verbalize your comment?
Yeah. So one thing to call out is the mange team in particular has dealt with this with the linear namespaces a lot. So it might be good to kind of sync out with a Liam on it, because he may have some good ideas here. The things that kind of come to mind for me that I've seen teams using is obviously enabling on a per repo basis. That's been a key one, where you can even say like, okay, I'm going to enable it on a specific repo, but then also maybe I do it on a subset of repos kind of over time. The other thing I've seen is basically enabling something for a fixed period of time and then turning it back off. And then probably the last two I should mention is obviously dogfooding by turning on it for our specific features. Maybe that's a way to do it. And the last one I don't think we've tried, but it's something we might want to experiment with is like if you can break it out such that you could actually cause it to go to a separate service, or like a separate not instance, but like, like in the case of like Workhorse, if you could break it out to actually run on its own separate sidekick, then it's conceivable that we could limit impact to other customers that way. So that might be a way to kind of still be able to experiment.
That's great.
One of the things, Kenny, just quickly on that, the package group actually rolled out our cleanup policies in a sort of a 1, 2, 5, 10% sort of schedule, like a very measured rollout. And that was really helpful because it allowed us to sort of track across the impact on systems, determine, load on Sidekick and a lot of other things in a really measured way. It certainly results in this sort of extended rollout of a feature set, but like in some scenarios like that could be helpful as well. David Fernandez was the engineer working on that. But if people have questions about the approach we took, I can grab an issue and I'll drop it in the agenda here.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, there's one other one I thought of, which was the pending queue that was work done by Reverse. Basically, my understanding, the way we did it was essentially we had the old system of basically running things. And they basically had running the code in parallel to that for the pending queue. So then it was like updating the pending queue and processing the same set of things at the same time. So that allowed them to kind of see, okay, like, is it actually matching the same behaviors associated with it? And then effectively they had a switch over associated with it. So it's like, it's running, but it's in benign state from an impact perspective. That's more of a transition of a existing piece of functionality than a true MVC though.
I'll ask because I saw a number of team members from front end and product and design. If I recall the specific challenge Sam is referencing, I think had more to do with the fact that there's very polished parts of our product that our users are expecting and like in workflows. And if you want to add an MVC, maybe it doesn't have as much polish. Anyone have experience with that challenge of we want to add something quick, but we don't want it to be a kind of I don't know what you call it, like a non-cohesive experience from what is already a polished experience?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. In the code review group, we have this sort of experience where we have a very complete experience, lovable at the time, and we're still introducing MVC UI changes, and we were making decisions to follow up with improvements, that sort of thing. And I remember we brought this up in an iteration office hours as well about this, and it's hard, but I think the conclusion there is just to be more meaningful in how we cut off the bits that go live and leverage feature flags to the full extent and only enable when we're comfortable. And there's going to be always moments where we push it too far, but then we step back. So what happened there was we enabled something that was an intermediate solution. Users revolted internally. And then we heard that feedback and we reverted that until we had a more complete solution. In that sense, we were pushing the envelope. We proved that it was a bit probably too far. It was in the aspect of the gap between the expectation of maturity and what we were shipping. We reverted, and then we shipped the whole complete solution. that's our advice. Like, use feature flags to the best of our ability, and then when we make a mistake, just revert quickly. But keep pushing the envelope. I don't know if that helps.
I think that's great. Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind, I think I'm familiar with that, but if you could drop a reference,
Link.
I'll make sure Sam and team connect with you on it.
I'll do that.
Thank you, Andre. Oh,
Yeah, I
and
added a
Kai-
link down below, Kenny, for one that's ongoing in code review right now, where the GitLab project is experimenting with full width in the diff view, and it's only on for the GitLab project while we try it there and get feedback. And so we usually open feedback issues for those. That's sort of like the critical piece, is you've got to have a mechanism to try and drive awareness and feedback when we do these. Otherwise, you get, in our case, we can end up with a lot of things. And is this known, or the questions channel that we triage on a regular basis to check for those. So
awesome. Great.
I think Eric Scherder also has a really good feedback issue that just got shared in product for something they rolled out. I think feedback issues are probably a good way to do this as well.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Christopher, you have the last discussion item. I think we have time for it.
Yeah, I just want to check in to see if we had questions on the, like you mentioned it above, Kenny, really quickly, but in theory, what we're going to do next month is do section by section based retrospectives. I didn't know if people had questions, logistical or otherwise, that they want to ask at this time.
I have a question about are we trying to encourage like more participation from ICs? Because I think that is one of the points into moving to smaller groups, right?
That's a great point. I don't think I had considered that. I think it was more that more attendance in this form from individual engineering managers was what I was thinking to measure it by, but I love the point that it will also encourage more participation from ICs. How do others think about that? The like sequencing of having a group retrospective and then a section one feels like there's going to be more immediate feedback rather than having that big kind of gap between group and then the company-wide one. But I don't know, would you expect ICs to join into the section retrospectives? It's kind of a question for engineering managers. I would expect product managers to participate. I don't know if I would have expected IC engineers to.
Well, and I think that I think that we want to enable asynchronous communication with this still, right? Like, so I could see teams where people are really distributed, times are distributed, that the attendance may not change at all, even though it was a little more focused around things that perhaps could be considered more relatable. So that's kind of when maybe not. It might feel a little bit more connected to what someone's working on, so maybe they feel like that's more interesting or valuable to them. But I couldn't speak for people on that front, so could go either way. It just depends when it's scheduled, I think. I think it'd be good to have more attendance, of course. I'm not suggesting otherwise. Go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, I think Arturo, your idea is a good one. Obviously everyone's invited, everyone's welcome. Like this retro, they're all welcome. But I know it can be daunting for a team member to potentially attend this and like feel like they can actively participate. So by doing it section by section, I think that gives us a better opportunity to see that. And that's what that ultimately probably the measure of success with this experiment is if we see more participation at each of the sections as an aggregate, then that feels like that would be my definition of success in this particular case, and continue in that fashion.
One thing, just I'll make a PSA. If someone has questions about process and logistics, I've been running the retrospective this last quarter using that retrospective planning issue that's been contributed to by everyone who's done it before me, but I found it very helpful. So I would expect that if you're a section leader who's going to be running one of these, you just use that same template and adjust it for your needs. And so in that sense, maybe from an individual group level, that's not that different. It's just instead of having 50 groups contributing to that issue and preparing, there would be a smaller number for the section.
Yeah, and in that regard, I asked this question in my staff meeting, and there was a bunch of different pieces in here, which I don't think we have to answer these all in real time, Kennedy, but it's probably something we need to kind of look at as we work through it. You know, so like Chun's is what will the format be? And I was going to let each team basically tailor it to their specific team's needs. But having a template, I think, is good guidance. And then Sam had a comment around, you know, how to run the retro section to the MR like that. It sounds like he had the right things in there. So I don't know if that was in the current proposal, but that's one thing we probably need to add. And then the last one, the last two were logistical. One was his managing calendar invites. And originally I thought we were trying to turn this around in a few days. So we have a month. So that was Todd's main point, but you know, having you know, like what do we want them all to meet at the same time, or do we want them staggered out? I think we probably want to have them all roughly on the same day, ideally, would be my thought. But I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, I think the sequencing that we have now, where we're almost 2 weeks post release day, and the groups have had time to complete their group retrospective, you wouldn't want to put too much space between the group retrospectives and the section one, so I'd want to keep it around the same time period.
Yeah, and then for cross-functional teams, the other part is I don't see as much cross-functional representation like in this call today, but in general, cross-functional representation where it goes cross-section, that's going to put strain on those folks. So we got to recognize that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are some sections that have really great cross-functional kind of like section quads, but there are others where those quad members would be split across multiple sections, and that's going to be hard for them to participate.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. There's also supporting functions like the community work that we have only one team and we cannot attend all 6. So experimenting on how the information or challenges get rolled up so we can digest and execute would be helpful.
Maybe that's another piece of success criteria, Mac, is you coming back and saying this is like this works for us or doesn't work for us, because ultimately that would be something we have to address.
You know, let's try it out. For example, I really get a value from the update from John on the community spend, and that's how can I digest that when we split up into 6 is something I look forward to.
All right, Christopher, you feel like we're good on that discussion?
I do.
Okay. So improvements for next release, what I was going to do is during the experiment, I will track the items that we've been tracking that are left open separately. And then we'll expect that there will be new items that will be tracked. So I will, it'll probably be, hopefully with this week that the merge request around the section retrospectives merges. We'll make sure to announce that and inform team members. But I wanted to make sure that we don't lose sight of these ones that are tracked centrally. So I'll be responsible for tracking those and ensuring that they are followed up on. In my mind, let me just verbalize what I think those are. I think the Jerome, your item is complete. It's Tanya's and Christopher's, yes, and John's is complete. So it's the items 3 and 4 that I'll be following up on essentially. And then I think that there's probably an item in our discussion item number 1 about a proposal for some activities. It was my proposal, so I'm happy to take it, but anybody else want to jump in on it? Okay, so I will follow up on that one. All right, this is a great discussion. Thanks, everybody.